Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My apartment is a decent two-bedroom place in a fairly good neighborhood. Nothing fancy, but comfortable. I work full-time at an office job that pays enough to cover my expenses, but like most people my age, I needed a roommate to help split the costs. About 8 months ago, I posted an ad looking for someone to share the space. That's when my former roommate showed up. They seemed normal enough during our initial meeting, polite, claimed to have steady income, said all the right things about being clean and responsible. I should have asked for references, but they had first month's rent ready and seemed eager to move in quickly. Red flag number one that I completely missed. The first month went smoothly, they paid their half of rent on time and kept their mess mostly contained to their room. I thought I'd gotten lucky with such an easygoing roommate. Month 2 is when things started falling apart. They came to me 3 days after rent was due with some sob story about their paycheck being delayed. I felt bad and covered their portion, thinking it was just a temporary hiccup. They promised to pay me back when their money came through. That payback never happened. Instead, month 3 rolled around and suddenly they had a family emergency that required all their money. Month 4 brought a car repair crisis. Month 5 was some issue with their bank freezing their account. The excuses kept coming, each one more elaborate than the last. Meanwhile, I was getting increasingly frustrated. Not only was I covering their rent, but they'd also started eating my food, leaving messes everywhere, and bringing friends over at all hours without asking. When I tried to talk to them about these issues, they'd either make more excuses or act like I was being unreasonable. The breaking point came during month 6. I sat them down for a serious conversation. I told them plainly that this situation wasn't working anymore and that they hadn't paid rent in 4 months. I explained that I couldn't keep covering for them and needed them to either start paying their fair share or find somewhere else to live. They got defensive immediately, saying their situation was complicated and they were doing their best. When I pressed the issue, they tried to guilt me by saying they thought we were friends and asking if I was really kicking them out. I explained that friends don't take advantage of each other and pointed out that they'd cost me thousands of dollars without seeming to care. Their response really set me off. They brushed off my concerns as dramatic and said, "It wasn't like I couldn't afford it. Just because I could technically afford to cover their expenses didn't mean I should have to." I gave them 30 days notice to either pay up or move out. They chose to move out, but not before making my life miserable for those final weeks. They'd slam doors, play loud music at night, and leave passive-aggressive notes around the apartment. When they finally left, my troubles were just beginning. About 2 weeks after they moved out, my phone started ringing constantly. The first call caught me completely off guard. Someone was trying to reach my former roommate about their overdue credit card payment. I explained that they didn't live here anymore and that they had the wrong number. The caller insisted this was the contact number they had on file and asked if I knew how to reach them. I told them no and asked them to remove this number from their system. That was just the beginning. Over the next few days, I got similar calls from different banks, loan companies, and collection agencies. Apparently, my former roommate had been defaulting on multiple debts and had given out my phone number as their contact information. At first, I tried to be polite and explain the situation to each caller, but when you're getting 5 or 6 of these calls per day, patience runs thin quickly. Most of them didn't believe me or kept insisting I must know how to contact this person. One particularly persistent bank caller kept pushing me about a seriously overdue auto loan. I told them for what felt like the 10th time that my former roommate didn't live here, that I didn't know where they were, and that I didn't care. The caller insisted that I must have some way to reach them because people don't just disappear. I told them that this one did and demanded they stop calling this number. After about a week of this nonsense, I decided to change my approach. Instead of trying to explain the situation, I started giving them exactly what they deserved to hear. The next call came from yet another collection agency. They asked if I was my former roommate, and I responded by asking if they were calling about a debt. When they confirmed they were calling about an overdue balance, I told them plainly that I had zero intention of paying this debt. The caller seemed confused, so I repeated myself clearly and added that they may have to sue to get that money. Then I hung up. It was surprisingly satisfying. Every subsequent call got the same treatment. The callers would get confused, sometimes try to argue, but I'd just repeat my line and hang up. Some of them called back immediately, probably thinking it was a bad connection or that they'd misheard me. One collection agent called back right away and asked if I had just said I wouldn't pay the debt. I confirmed that was exactly what I said, repeating that I had zero intention of paying this debt and that they may have to sue to get that money. They tried to offer a payment plan, but I just hung up on them. The beauty of my response was that it was completely truthful. I genuinely had zero intention of paying their debt because it wasn't mine to pay, and they probably would have to sue to get their money, though they'd be suing the wrong person. After a couple of weeks of this routine, the calls started becoming less frequent. Word must have gotten around that the number they had was leading them to someone who was openly hostile about paying. Some agencies probably marked the number as uncooperative or potentially belonging to someone who declared bankruptcy. The irony wasn't lost on me. My former roommate thought they were being clever by sticking me with harassment from their creditors. Instead, they'd basically announced to the entire financial world that they were a deadbeat who defaulted on multiple loans and credit cards. Their revenge had backfired spectacularly. I eventually changed my phone number anyway just to be completely done with the situation. I live in a tiny apartment and don't spend much on luxuries because I'm trying to build up an emergency fund and maybe save for a house down payment someday. My parents always taught me to be responsible with money, and that stuck with me. Last year, my friend from college reached out to me in a panic. We'd been pretty close during our freshman and sophomore years, but after graduation, we only talked maybe once every few months. She called me, crying one evening, telling me she was in a terrible mess. She explained that her car had broken down and needed immediate repairs or she'd lose her job. The repair shop wanted $2,000, which was way more than she had. She said she'd already called everyone she knew and nobody could help. Her family was dealing with their own money problems, her credit cards were maxed out, and the bank wouldn't give her a loan. She sounded desperate and said she literally had nowhere else to turn. I felt terrible for her. I knew what it was like to worry about money, and losing a job because of car repairs seemed really unfair. I'd been saving for over a year and had about $5,000 in my emergency fund. When I offered to lend her the money, she was incredibly grateful and promised to pay me back in 6 months, maybe even sooner. She said she was getting a promotion at work soon and everything would be fine. She kept telling me I was the best friend ever and that she'd never forget this. I transferred the money to her account that same night. $2,000 was a lot for me, but I figured that's what friends do for each other. She seemed so thankful and promised multiple times that she'd pay me back quickly. The 6 months came and went. When I casually brought it up, she said work had been slow and she was still struggling financially. I understood because the economy was tough for everyone, so I didn't want to pressure her. Another few months passed. I mentioned it again because I was thinking about moving to a better apartment and could really use that money. She told me things were still really tight and asked if I could give her a little more time. I said of course and told her I just wanted to check in. The same conversation happened several more times over the next few months. Each time she had a different excuse. Her hours got cut. Her rent went up. She had unexpected medical bills. I started to feel like maybe I'd made a mistake, but I didn't want to be the kind of person who harasses friends about money. Then, about 13 months after I lent her the money, I was scrolling through social media and saw her posts from what was obviously an expensive vacation. She was in Bali, staying at some luxury resort with an infinity pool overlooking the ocean. The pictures showed her getting massages at a spa, eating at fancy restaurants, and staying in what looked like a private villa. She was posting about room service breakfasts that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a week. There were photos of her shopping at high-end boutiques and buying expensive clothes. One post showed her at some exclusive beach club where she was drinking cocktails that looked like they cost $50 each. I felt sick to my stomach. Here I was, still living in my cramped apartment and eating ramen noodles for dinner half the time, while she was living it up in paradise with money she apparently had all along. I decided to message her privately. I tried to keep it friendly and not accusatory. I told her the resort looked incredible and that I hoped she was having a great vacation. Then I asked if we could talk about the $2,000 she owed me when she got back. I explained that I've been really patient, but seeing that she could afford luxury trips made me feel like I was being taken for granted. She read the message immediately but didn't respond for 3 days. When she finally replied, her attitude was shocking. She accused me of harassing her about money while she was trying to enjoy her vacation. She called me petty and jealous. I told her I wasn't trying to harass her and that I just thought it was fair to ask for my money back when she was clearly able to afford expensive trips. She claimed I had no idea what her financial situation was like and said the trip was a gift from her boyfriend's family and that she didn't pay for any of it. I pointed out that even if that was true, she'd been telling me for months that she was broke. I asked why she couldn't use her own money to pay me back if someone else was paying for her vacation. She said she was being selfish and that she thought I was a real friend, but apparently I was just like everyone else and only cared about money. I told her that wasn't fair because I'd waited over a year and never pressured her. I explained that I only brought it up because she was posting about luxury vacations while telling me she couldn't afford to pay me back. She said she didn't need the drama in her life, called me toxic, and said she was done with the conversation. Then she blocked me, not just on the messaging app, but on all social media platforms. I had lent her money when she was desperate, been patient for over a year, and now I was the bad guy for asking for it back. I talked to some mutual friends about the situation. It turned out she had been borrowing money from several people and not paying anyone back. One friend said she'd lent her $800 for rent money around the same time I gave her the car repair money. Another said she borrowed $300 for groceries a few months later. When our mutual friends confronted her about all the unpaid loans, she claimed we were all ganging up on her and being bullies. She said we were jealous of her success and trying to bring her down. A few weeks later, one of our friends worked at the same company she did and found out she had been lying about her job situation. She never got that promotion she mentioned, but she also never had her hours cut or any of the financial problems she claimed. She was actually making good money and had been using the borrowed money to fund her lifestyle while saving her own paychecks. Eventually, her lies caught up with her. She had borrowed money from so many people that word got around our entire social circle. Nobody would lend her anything anymore, and most people stopped inviting her to gatherings because they didn't trust her. My wife and I bought our first house 3 years ago in what seemed like a nice neighborhood. We're both teachers, saved up for years to afford the down payment, and we're so excited to finally have our own place where we could host family gatherings. The house came with a decent-sized backyard and a driveway that fits 2 cars. The street parking is completely public. No HOA, no restrictions, just regular city street parking that anyone can use. We learned this the hard way when our new neighbor moved in next door about 6 months after us. Karen is probably in her 50s, lives alone except for her teenage daughter who visits every other weekend. From day one, she made it clear she considered the street in front of both our houses to be her personal parking lot. She'd leave passive-aggressive notes on any car that wasn't hers, even though it was completely legal public parking. The first real confrontation happened about a year ago when my brother visited and parked his truck on the street. I came home from work to find Karen standing in my driveway, arms crossed, looking furious. She demanded that my brother move his truck immediately. When I asked why, she said that was where she parked and everyone knew that. I explained that he was parked legally on a public street, but she said it was basically her spot now since she'd been parking there for months. I told her that wasn't how public streets worked and apologized, but that was the truth. She stormed off, but this became a recurring theme. Every time we had visitors, she'd walk over with demands and threats. We always politely refused because, frankly, she had no legal right to claim public parking spaces. Fast forward to last month. My wife's family was visiting for her mom's birthday. About 12 people total. We've been planning this barbecue for weeks. Her parents, siblings, their kids, my parents, my brother and his girlfriend. A real family celebration. Since we knew we'd have several cars, I walked over to Karen's house the day before to give her a heads up, thinking maybe we could work something out neighborly. I told her we were having a family gathering the next day and would probably have 4 or 5 extra cars that might need to park on the street. She said absolutely not and that she wouldn't have it. I clarified that I wasn't asking permission, just being courteous and letting her know. She warned me that if we parked more than one car on the street tomorrow, there would be problems. When I asked what kind of problems, she said I'd find out. I should have taken that threat more seriously, but honestly, what could she do? It was legal parking. The next day started perfectly. Everyone arrived around noon, we fired up the grill, the kids were playing in the backyard, and the adults were catching up. My father-in-law had driven separately and parked right in front of Karen's house. My brother parked 2 spaces down. My sister-in-law parked across the street, all completely legal. Around 2 p.m., we heard Karen's front door slam. I looked over and saw her on her phone, pacing back and forth on her porch, gesturing wildly. She kept looking toward our house while talking. My wife noticed too and asked if we should go talk to her. I said no, we should let her cool off since we weren't doing anything wrong. That was around 2:15 p.m. At exactly 3:47 p.m., our peaceful family barbecue turned into absolute chaos. The first thing we heard was sirens, lots of them, then shouting from the street. A voice with a megaphone announced that this was police and everyone needed to exit the house immediately with their hands visible. My brother was the first to look out front. He told us there were like 8 police cars out there and a SWAT van. We all froze. My nephews started crying. My mother-in-law grabbed the younger kids. The megaphone announced again that we needed to exit the house now and that this was not a drill. I walked to the front door, hands up, completely confused. I asked the officers what was going on. The SWAT officer told me to step outside slowly and said they had reports of a hostage situation at this address. I said there was no hostage situation and that we were having a barbecue. The officer said they needed everyone out of the house immediately for their safety. The next hour was a nightmare. They made all 12 of us sit on the curb while they searched our house. My 5-year-old niece was terrified and crying. My elderly father-in-law has a heart condition and the stress was making him sick. The neighbors all came out to watch the spectacle. The SWAT team went through every room looking for hostages that didn't exist. They had shields, rifles, the whole setup for a family barbecue. After about 40 minutes, the lead officer came back out and asked me to explain the call they received. I said I had no idea what call they got and asked what exactly they were told. The officer explained they got a 911 call reporting that a teenage girl was being held against her will at this address. The caller said she was the girl's mother and that dangerous individuals had taken her daughter hostage. That's when it clicked. I asked if the caller was my next-door neighbor by any chance. The officer said he couldn't reveal the caller's identity but asked why I was asking. I explained that she'd been harassing us about parking on the public street and that her daughter wasn't even here since she lived with her father. My wife added that this was retaliation and that Karen had threatened problems yesterday when we told her about having guests over. The officer looked skeptical until Karen herself appeared. She'd been watching from her house, and I guess she figured the show was over and wanted to gloat. She said that maybe next time we'd think twice about ignoring her warnings. The SWAT officer asked if she was the one who called this in. She said she did what she had to do to get these people to respect the neighborhood. The officer asked if she filed a false police report. She said she didn't file a false anything and claimed she said there were dangerous people holding someone against their will, pointing to all the cars and saying clearly something suspicious was happening. The officer asked where her daughter was. Karen said she was at her father's house this weekend. When the officer asked if her daughter was never at this address, you could see the moment Karen realized she'd messed up big time. She tried to say, well, no, but the officer cut her off and told her she was under arrest for filing a false police report and misuse of emergency services. Watching them handcuff Karen on her own front lawn while all our family and the gathered neighbors watched was probably the most satisfying moment of my life. Her face went from smug to panicked to absolutely furious. She protested that this was ridiculous and that we were the ones causing problems in the neighborhood. The SWAT officer told her she had the right to remain silent and suggested she use it. But the story doesn't end there. The SWAT team had kicked in our back door during their search. They'd also damaged some drywall checking for hidden rooms or whatever they thought they might find. The department apologized but said we'd need to file insurance claims for the damages. The insurance company told us that since the damage was caused by a false police report, we could sue the person who made the false report for reimbursement. So that's exactly what we did. My brother-in-law is a lawyer and he was furious about what happened to his family. He took the case pro bono and went after Karen for not just the property damage, but also emotional distress, harassment, and anything else he could think of. Karen tried to claim she thought something suspicious was really happening, but the 911 recording was pretty damning. She specifically said her daughter was being held hostage at our address, and when pressed for details, she described our guests as dangerous individuals who refused to follow neighborhood rules. The case took about 4 months to resolve. Karen ended up pleading guilty to the criminal charges to avoid jail time, but she got 2 years probation and community service. The civil suit was even better. She had to pay for all our damages, plus court costs, plus additional compensation for the trauma her stunt caused our family. She had to sell her house to pay the settlement. Turns out making false emergency calls that waste city resources and traumatize families is expensive. Who knew? I work in IT for a small company downtown. My girlfriend and I recently moved into our first apartment together, and we've been trying to tackle all those boring adult responsibilities like keeping the place clean and organized. My girlfriend works night shifts at the hospital, so she's usually sleeping in on weekend mornings while I try to be productive. This particular Sunday was a holiday weekend, and I had planned to spend the whole day getting caught up on chores. You know how it is, laundry, dishes, cleaning the bathroom, all that fun stuff that somehow never gets done during the week. By mid-morning, I was already feeling pretty accomplished. I'd done 2 loads of laundry and deep cleaned the kitchen, but all that work made me hungry, and I knew my girlfriend would be waking up soon and probably want breakfast too. That's when I decided to make a quick Dunkin' run. I pulled up the app on my phone and placed our usual order: 2 breakfast sandwiches, hash browns, and coffee. The app said it would be ready for pickup in about 15 minutes, which seemed reasonable. I figured I could grab the food, bring it home, and still have most of the day left for more cleaning. When I got to the store, it was absolutely packed. I mean, it was 10 in the morning on a holiday Sunday, so I totally understood why. There were probably 8 or 9 people ahead of me in line, and I could see the employees behind the counter moving like they were in a race. They were clearly doing their best to keep up with the rush. I found a spot near the pickup counter and settled in to wait. The app had said my order would be ready, but with how busy they were, I figured it might take a few extra minutes. No big deal, I'm not the type to get worked up over stuff like that. That's when she showed up. This woman, probably in her 50s, came bursting through the front doors like she owned the place. She was dressed for a pool party or something. Bright swimsuit cover-up, big sunglasses, flip-flops, and she had this attitude that hit you like a slap in the face. She literally shouted her name and demanded to know if her to-go order was ready while the doors were still swinging behind her. I'm not exaggerating when I say she pushed those doors hard, like she was trying to see how far back they would go. The whole thing was so dramatic and unnecessary. None of the employees were at the front counter when she made her grand entrance because they were all in the back working on orders. But Karen didn't seem to care about that. She stood there for maybe 30 seconds before getting impatient and loudly demanding attention for her to-go order. Her voice had this sharp, demanding tone that made everyone in the store turn and look. I could see other customers exchanging looks, probably thinking the same thing I was, that this lady needed to chill out. A few more people came in behind her, and finally, one of the employees noticed the crowd at the counter and came over to help. This poor guy looked like he was maybe 20 years old, probably working his way through college, and he was clearly stressed from the morning rush. The employee apologized for the wait and asked everyone for their names so he could check on their orders. Karen immediately jumped in before anyone else could speak, announcing her name and complaining that she'd been waiting forever. The employee nodded and asked for everyone else's names too. By now, there were 5 or 6 other customers waiting, and this kid was trying his best to keep track of everything. He grabbed a pen and started writing down names, probably trying to figure out what orders were ready. Just when he was about to head back to check on the orders, the doors burst open again. Another woman, probably Karen's friend, came storming in with the same entitled energy. She immediately started complaining about how long everything was taking. Karen jumped on this opportunity to complain more, whining about why they would even have a to-go option on their app if customers had to wait so long. I checked my phone. It had been maybe 2 minutes since Karen first walked in. 2 minutes, and she was acting like she'd been waiting for an hour. I'm not a confrontational person at all. I hate conflict and usually just try to keep my head down in situations like this, but watching these 2 women act like complete jerks to people who were clearly working their asses off was making my blood boil. Still, I kept my mouth shut. I figured the best thing to do was just wait it out and hope my order would be ready soon. The young employee disappeared into the back again, probably to check on orders. I could hear him talking to his co-workers, and it sounded like they were trying to organize everything and figure out what was ready. Meanwhile, Karen was tapping her foot and sighing dramatically every few seconds. Karen started ranting about how ridiculous the situation was and how she was never coming here again. Her friend chimed in that they should have just gone to Starbucks instead. Karen agreed, saying that at least Starbucks knew how to run a business. I wanted to tell them that if they were in such a hurry, maybe they shouldn't have ordered during the busiest time of the week. But again, I kept quiet. I'm not the type to start arguments with strangers, especially entitled ones who clearly weren't going to listen to reason anyway. About a minute later, the employee came back to the counter carrying several bags. He had this little smile on his face that I didn't think much of at the time, but looking back, it was probably because he had something planned. The employee announced that he had several orders ready and started calling out names. Mine was first. I grabbed my bag and drink, feeling relieved that I could finally get out of there. When I was walking toward the door, he called out the names of all the other customers who had been waiting, everyone except Karen. I held the door open for the other customers when they filed out. There was this really nice older guy who thanked me with a big smile, and a couple of other people who seemed just happy to escape the drama. When I was walking to my car, I could hear Karen's voice getting louder and more shrill behind me. She was screaming about where her food was, insisting that she was there first, and that the whole situation was unacceptable. I turned around just in time to see the employee's response, and I swear it was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed in customer service. He told her with perfect, innocent politeness that her order was coming up hot and ready next. He said it with this perfect, innocent smile like he was just being helpful, but there was definitely a little smirk there that told the whole story. This wasn't his first rodeo with entitled customers, and he knew exactly what he was doing. I started laughing when I walked to my car. Not loud enough for anyone to hear, but I was definitely grinning like an idiot. It was the kind of petty revenge that you always think of later in the shower, when you're imagining all the clever comebacks you should have used. Except this guy actually did it in real time. The whole drive home, I kept thinking about how perfect that moment was. Karen had been incredibly rude to people who were just trying to do their jobs during a busy morning rush. She acted like the world revolved around her and that everyone else should drop everything to serve her immediately. And this young employee, who probably deals with people like that every day, found the perfect way to put her in her place without being openly rude himself. This happened about 6 months ago when I was working part-time at this burger place with a drive-thru. I was a college student trying to make some extra cash, and honestly, the job wasn't too bad most of the time. I've been there for almost a year, and I knew all the regulars pretty well. Let me tell you about two people who are important to this story. First, there's this customer I'll call Karen. She came in maybe 3 times a week, always ordered the same thing: a chicken sandwich with no mayo, extra pickles, and a large fry. Now, Karen was what you'd call demanding. She had very specific ways she wanted things done, and if you messed up even the smallest detail, she'd let you know about it. But here's the thing: once you learned how she liked things, she was actually pretty nice. We'd chat about her garden or her grandkids while she waited for her food. Most of my co-workers couldn't stand her, but I didn't mind taking her orders because I knew what she expected. Then there was our new general manager. This guy came in about 2 months before this whole thing went down. The owner brought him in because apparently our old manager wasn't running things efficiently enough, even though everything seemed fine to me. This new manager was supposed to be the assistant at first, but then the owner fired our previous general manager out of nowhere, and suddenly this guy was in charge. From day one, this manager was a nightmare. He was the type who thought being a boss meant being mean to everyone. He'd nitpick everything we did, even when customers were happy. My favorite example of how ridiculous he was happened during a busy lunch rush. He actually pulled our entire shift into the back office while we still had a line of cars in the drive-thru just to lecture us about not smiling enough. Customers were honking outside and he's in there telling us we need to show more enthusiasm. That's the kind of manager he was. Anyway, let me explain how our drive-thru system worked. When someone ordered food, we'd give them a numbered sticker to put somewhere on their car. The kitchen staff would use that number to match the right order to the right car when they brought the food out. Simple system, and it worked great. Now, most of the time we'd put these stickers on the side mirror because it was easy to see from both sides of the car. But sometimes we couldn't reach the mirror or the customer didn't want it there, so we'd put it on the car door instead. Karen was one of those customers who always asked for it on the door. She was convinced that having anything on her mirror, even a tiny sticker, would somehow cause her to get into an accident. I thought it was a bit paranoid, but hey, customer service, right? It wasn't a big deal to put it on her door instead. This went on for months without any problems. Karen got her sticker on the door, the kitchen could still see the number just fine, and everyone was happy. Then our wonderful new manager decided he needed to fix something that wasn't broken. He announced that from now on, all stickers had to go on mirrors, no exceptions. When I asked him why, he just said it looked more professional or some nonsense like that. I asked him what would happen if a customer specifically requested the sticker somewhere else. He told me it didn't matter and that mirrors were the only acceptable location. That was the new rule, and he made it clear there would be no exceptions. I figured maybe he'd make an exception for regular customers with specific requests, but I was wrong about that. The next time Karen came through, I followed the new rule and put her sticker on the mirror like I was supposed to. She immediately got that look on her face that meant trouble. Karen asked me what I was doing and told me not to put it there because she'd get into an accident. I apologized and explained that there was a new rule requiring all stickers to go on mirrors. She said that was ridiculous and wanted to know why they were changing something that had worked fine for months. I told her I knew it seemed silly, but my manager had said no exceptions, and I didn't want to get in trouble. Karen asked who had made this stupid rule. I told her it was the general manager and gave her his name. She wanted to know where he was so she could talk to him. I explained that he was in the back office but was pretty busy. She said she didn't care how busy he was because this was the dumbest thing she'd ever heard. I could see she was getting really worked up, so I just handed her the receipt and told her someone would bring her food out shortly. She drove to a parking spot, and I watched her get out of her car and walk toward our front door. What happened next? I had to piece together from my co-workers because I was stuck at the drive-thru window. But apparently Karen walked right up to the counter and demanded to speak to the manager. When he came out, she didn't waste any time. Karen asked if he was the one who made the new rule about the stickers. He confirmed that he was and asked if there was a problem. She told him there definitely was a problem. She explained that she'd been coming there for over a year and the young man at the drive-thru had always put her sticker on the door because she asked him to. Now he was telling her that couldn't happen anymore. The manager explained that they had policies for a reason and that the stickers needed to go on mirrors so the staff could see them properly. Karen called that complete garbage and said he knew it. She pointed out that they could see the door just fine and demanded to know what the point was of forcing them to put it somewhere the customer didn't want it. My co-worker, who was working the front counter, said Karen's voice kept getting louder and other customers were starting to stare. The manager tried to calm her down, but she wasn't having it. Karen told him she'd been nothing but polite to the staff and that she tipped well. All she asked was that they put a tiny sticker on her door instead of her mirror. If that was too much trouble for him, maybe she should take her business somewhere else. The manager asked her to please lower her voice so they could discuss this calmly. Karen told him not to tell her to lower her voice. She said he'd made a stupid rule that served no purpose except to annoy customers. She mentioned that the boy at the window had said he told him no exceptions, and she wanted to know no exceptions for what, being considerate. This went on for several more minutes. Karen apparently laid into him about everything from the pointlessness of the rule to how he was making his employees' jobs harder for no reason. She mentioned how she'd been coming there for months without any problems until he showed up and started fixing things that weren't broken. When she told him exactly what his problem was, she said he thought being a manager meant making up rules just to show people he was in charge. But she explained that real leadership was about making things work better, not worse. This sticker nonsense made things worse. By the time she was done with him, the poor guy looked like he'd been hit by a truck. She'd basically called out every single thing he'd been doing wrong since he started, and she did it in front of a restaurant full of customers. The next day, he pulled me aside and told me that customers could request to have their stickers placed on their doors if they preferred. He tried to make it sound like he was just clarifying the policy, but I knew what had really happened. When Karen came in the next time, she told me she hoped I'd learned something from yesterday. The manager, who happened to be nearby, said they were always looking for ways to improve their customer service. Karen told him that was good, and then instructed me to put her sticker on the door where it belonged. From that day forward, the sticker rule was basically back to how it was before, except now the manager pretended like the whole thing had been his idea. Karen never mentioned the confrontation to me directly, but she did seem extra pleased with herself for the next few weeks. The funniest part was watching the manager try to act like nothing had happened while clearly being terrified every time Karen's car pulled up to the drive-thru. He'd suddenly find urgent paperwork to do in the back office whenever she came in. Eventually, the owner must have gotten wind of how things were going because the manager got transferred to a different location about a month later. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.